Hi, my name's Avery Knox, and the last thing my family said to me before I blacked out was, "You're so dramatic." I was bleeding on the floor, my stepbrother still holding the bat, my father smirking, all because I said no to $3,000 for sneakers. But that night didn't break me. It exposed them, their lies, their cruelty, their plan to erase me. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But if that was the end, why did someone try to kill the only person who helped me? And why, months later, is my stepbrother still meeting with men in suits? What if the courtroom wasn't the finish line? What if it was just the start of something worse? You ready to hear what really happened? Because I promise you, they're not. I got home later than usual that night. The kind of late that makes you question if the day even happened or if you just dreamt yourself through it. The clock over the mantel said 10:45. Outside, the Virginia winter pressed cold against the windows, the kind that makes you feel small in your own house. The smell of roasted beef and red wine still hung in the air, faint but mocking. Dinner was long over. The table was cleared except for one empty chair at the far end. Mine. The seat was pushed back slightly, as if someone had sat there, then thought better of it. My father, Raymond, looked up from his glass. "You should have called. We assumed you weren't coming." His tone was calm, measured, like every word had been through a filter before it reached me. Marla, my stepmother, smiled without looking at me. She poured another generous glass of wine for Derek, my stepbrother, who was lounging comfortably in what used to be my chair. He leaned back, legs stretched out, tapping his phone against the table like he owned the place. No one asked how my day had been. No one ever did. My plate sat cold, untouched, a slab of gray meat congealed with fat. My stomach turned just looking at it. I wasn't really hungry anymore. Derek broke the silence first. "So, how's work, Avery? Still driving trucks for peanuts, or did they finally make you manager of the loading dock?" He said it with a smile, that kind of smirk only people who've never worried about rent can pull off. "It's steady," I said quietly. "Pays the bills." "Nice," he said, twirling his fork. "I need $3,000 by next week. Limited edition sneakers. They're an investment, you know? They'll double in value in a month." Raymond chuckled, but there was steel under it. "Come on, Avery, help your brother out. You're always talking about responsibility." Marla sighed in that long, performative way of hers. "You make decent money. Don't be so stingy, honey. Family helps family." "I can't," I said simply. The air thickened. Derek's smile slipped. "Can't or won't?" "I just can't," I repeated. Raymond set his glass down hard enough to make it ring. "You always find an excuse, don't you? It's just money, Avery. What are you saving it for anyway? A dream that's never going to happen?" Marla's voice was syrupy sweet. "He's always been like this, always so selfish. No wonder no one relies on him." Their laughter filled the room, soft, practiced, cruel. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. That kind of laughter cuts deeper when it's controlled. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. My pulse echoed in my ears. When I stood to leave, Marla's voice followed me. "Leave your plate. We'll handle it. You always do so little anyway." Raymond let out a low chuckle. "Yeah, don't strain yourself." I froze for a moment, one hand on the back of my chair. The sound of the clock ticking filled the space between us. My knuckles went white as I gripped the wood tighter. "Thank you for dinner," I whispered. No one answered. The quiet stretched so long it felt like a punishment. The only sound was the slow clink of Derek's fork hitting his plate. I turned and walked out, slow, deliberate, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the cold hit me like an open hand. My car sat at the curb, covered in a thin layer of frost. I got in, shut the door, and just sat there for a while under the dull glow of the streetlight. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered, tired, faded around the edges. I thought about how, somewhere along the line, I'd stopped being a son and turned into a placeholder, someone to balance the noise by staying quiet. I opened my phone and typed, "One day, I'll stop coming back to that house." Then I deleted it before hitting send. When I got back to my apartment, the fridge hummed like an old memory. The walls felt thinner somehow, like they'd been listening. I looked at the photo on the counter, a family portrait from years ago. My father, Marla, Derek, and me, cropped halfway out of the frame. Only my shoulder remained, a ghost at the edge of their happiness. I whispered into the empty kitchen, "Even ghosts take up more space than I do." The phone buzzed. A message from Derek lit up the screen. "Meet me at midnight. I have something to discuss." The message kept glowing on my screen long after I read it. "Meet me at midnight. I have something to discuss." I stared at it for a full minute, maybe more. I wasn't sure if it was a threat or just another one of Derek's little power plays. Either way, I knew ignoring it would only make things worse later. By the time I got back into the car, the night had grown colder. The moonlight stretched thin across the road, and the sound of the tires on the gravel driveway felt too loud in the quiet. My breath fogged the windshield as I parked outside the house again. The garage door was half open, a single bulb swinging above, flickering like it was nervous to stay lit. I pushed the door open the rest of the way. Derek was inside, pacing like a man who'd been drinking too much energy and too little reason. His phone lit his face in short flashes, his grin sharp, a little too confident for someone calling at midnight. "You came," he said, voice rising like it was a joke. "Didn't think you had the guts. Thought you'd ghost me like usual." "I'm here," I said, keeping my distance near the entrance. "You said you needed to talk." He laughed, tossing his phone onto the workbench. "Yeah, about those sneakers." The air between us tightened. I frowned. "You dragged me out here to talk about shoes?" His tone dropped low, cutting through the air. "I need 3,000. Tonight." I blinked, waiting for him to laugh again, to say he was joking. But he didn't. His eyes didn't have humor in them, just something darker, twitchy. "That's not happening," I said evenly. "You've had enough of my help already." Derek stepped closer, his sneakers squeaking against the concrete floor. "You make good money. Don't pretend you don't. You just don't share." "Share?" I said quietly. "You're 28, Derek. You can work," he scoffed. "Work? Dad said you got promoted. You think that paycheck's yours alone? You've been taking from this family since the day you moved back here." That word again. Taking. The same poison Marla used every time she wanted to remind me I didn't belong. "I owe you nothing," I said, each word slow, measured. His smile dropped. His jaw clenched, muscles working like gears about to snap. "You always thought you were better than us." He turned suddenly, grabbing something off the tool rack, a bat, my father's old aluminum one. "Derek," I said, hands raised slightly. "Don't." He didn't answer. The first swing hit the wall beside me, splintering the wooden shelf. Tools clattered to the floor. The sound was sharp, final. "You think you're better than us?" he shouted again, voice breaking. I stepped back, my heel hitting a paint can. The smell of old oil and cold metal filled the air. Derek, stop. You're not thinking straight. The second swing grazed my shoulder. Pain shot down my arm, a deep, electric sting. My body reacted. Before my mind caught up, I stumbled backward, trying to put distance between us. But the third swing came faster. The world cracked white for a second. The edge of the bat connected with the side of my head. The sound it made wasn't cinematic. It was dull, heavy, like a thick branch breaking under snow. I hit the ground hard. The concrete felt cold against my cheek. My ears rang, my vision swimming. Somewhere above me, Derek's breath came heavy, unsteady. Then I heard another sound, soft laughter. A woman's. Marla stood at the doorway, a phone held up recording. "You're so dramatic, Avery," she said, her voice smooth as wine. "It's just a scratch." I blinked, trying to focus. The light from the bulb swung behind her head, and for a moment it looked like she had a halo. A cruel one. "You're both insane," I murmured. She laughed again, stepping closer. "No, sweetheart, we're family." Behind her, I heard footsteps. Raymond appeared, robe hanging open, rubbing his eyes like he'd just woken up from a nap. He took in the scene, me on the floor, Derek gripping the bat, Marla still recording, and didn't even flinch. "Maybe now you'll learn to share," he said. Something inside me twisted, deeper than pain. For a second, I thought I might vomit, but what came up instead was clarity. I pushed myself onto my elbows, blood sliding down my face. "You're not my family," I whispered. Raymond shrugged. "If that makes you feel better." Marla finally stopped recording and slipped her phone into her robe pocket. Derek wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his adrenaline fading. "Guess that's your answer then," he muttered. The room swam. I crawled toward the garage door, each movement a war. My hand hit the gravel outside. The air was freezing, but it felt clean. I fumbled my phone from my jacket pocket. The screen cracked from the fall. My thumb smeared blood across it as I typed 3 letters into a group chat I hadn't used in years. SOS. The screen flickered, then went dark. My body went limp against the car tire. Somewhere in the blur, I heard sirens, distant, faint, like they were traveling through fog. I didn't know if they were real or just in my head. But before the darkness took over, one thought burned clear. If they ever face me again, I won't be silent. The sirens grew louder. Then everything faded, not into silence, but into a bright, sharp ringing that filled every corner of me. The sharp ringing in my ears faded into something softer, steadier, a rhythmic beep. Then the scent hit me. Disinfectant, bleach, a sterile chill that made every hair on my arms stand up. My body didn't want to move. My eyes opened slow, reluctant, like they already knew the world wasn't safe anymore. The ceiling above me was dull white, a long fluorescent tube humming overhead. My mouth was dry, tasted like pennies. My head throbbed. My ribs felt like they were wrapped in barbed wire. I shifted slightly, pain blooming across my side like a bruise with a voice. Then I heard him. Finally awake. Derek's voice, casual as if we were in the living room watching football. He stood by the window, arms crossed, face unreadable, but calm. Too calm. To his left, Marla sat in one of the visitor chairs, legs crossed, holding a coffee cup she probably didn't pay for. Her eyes looked glassy, like she was trying to fake concern. Raymond stood behind them, flipping through a folder of papers with the same energy he used reviewing receipts. I tried to speak, but it came out like a groan. Raymond looked up first. "You had quite a fall, son." Fall? What? I croaked. He smiled, thin, businesslike. You slipped in the garage, hit your head on the tool rack. Lucky Derek was there to call us. I stared, blinking slowly, waiting for the punchline. Marla's voice was low, even. We were terrified, Avery. You were completely out. Derek thought you might have a seizure. Derek tilted his head, like he was doing me a favor. Guess you should watch your step next time, huh? The lie dropped into the room like a grenade, silent but devastating. I scanned their faces. They were in sync, polished, rehearsed. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was a performance. My hand trembled slightly as I tried to sit up. Pain answered immediately. Ribs, shoulder, skull. I collapsed back into the pillows. I remembered the bat, the laughter, the phone in Marla's hand. I remembered every inch of that garage, every breath before the swing hit my temple. But here I was, flat on my back, watching them turn the truth into a bedtime story. They'd twisted the whole thing, and no one in this room was going to say otherwise. A soft knock broke the tension. A police officer stepped in. Medium build, South Asian, late 30s maybe. His name tag read Patel. He nodded at Raymond first. Mr. Knox. Raymond gave him that polite handshake smile. Officer. The cop turned to me like I was an afterthought. Mr. Knox, I've already spoken with your father and stepmother. Everyone seems to agree this was an unfortunate accident. Just need you to confirm it for the record. His tone was polite, flat, empty. I opened my mouth, but my throat caught. Marla was watching me like a hawk. Her face didn't move, but her eyes were warning me. Raymond added smoothly, "Let's not make this any bigger than it needs to be. Hospital bills are covered. We just want you safe at home." Derek scratched his chin, acting bored. I looked at Officer Patel again, searching, hoping maybe he could see it, that this was wrong. But his eyes didn't meet mine for long. He tapped his notepad once. "All right then, I'll close the report. Rest up." He left without looking back. The door clicked shut. The silence left behind was not peaceful. It pressed down on my chest. They had me boxed in. On paper, I was the careless one, the accident, the family burden who just couldn't get it together. It was more than cruelty. It was strategy. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, forcing myself not to cry. I couldn't give them that. I wouldn't. Eventually, they left. Raymond first, muttering something about picking up prescriptions. Marla followed with her purse slung over her shoulder, her coffee now empty. Derek lingered a second longer. He leaned in slightly. "You don't get to make waves anymore, Avery," he said. "No one's gonna believe you. You've always been a little off, haven't you?" I didn't respond, just stared at the monitor next to my bed until he walked out. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then the nurse came in. She was older, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, floral scrubs, name tag, Mrs. Cooper. She checked the monitors, adjusted my IV, then she leaned in, voice soft. "You didn't fall." I blinked, surprised. She continued. "Your intake notes, before they were updated, listed blunt force trauma. I've raised 2 sons. That bruise on your arm? It's not from a shelf." My heart kicked in my chest. Why are you telling me this?" She glanced at the door. "Because truth gets buried fast in places like this. If you want to make a move, you'll need proof. Start with this." She slipped a folded piece of paper beneath my blanket. It's a copy of the original triage notes before someone changed them. I stared at her. "Why help me?" She gave a faint smile. "Because I've seen this kind of family before. Kind that smiles in church and ruins each other behind closed doors. Then she added, just before leaving, "Oh, and there's a camera in that garage. They don't know I checked the admission file." The room swam slightly, but this time not from pain. My brain was kicking into place. A thread of hope, frayed but real, stretched in front of me. They'd built their story fast, but if I stayed quiet, it would become fact, and I'd disappear behind it, just like in that photo at home, cropped out without a sound. I whispered to no one, "If truth is just another story, I'll write mine better." I turned my head toward the chair by my bed, empty again, but this time it didn't sting. It looked like space, room to breathe, room to fight back. That thought had echoed in my chest like a second heartbeat. It followed me through discharge paperwork, through the silence of the hospital elevator, through every inch of the drive home. But it wasn't until the third morning, cold, quiet, no traffic yet on my side of Fairfax, that I really knew where I needed to be. The garage. I pulled into the driveway slowly, headlights off. The sun hadn't cracked the horizon yet, but that old house already felt awake, like it had eyes. The garage door stood half open, same as that night. The light above it flickered, same haunting buzz. I sat in the car for a minute, engine still humming, gripping the steering wheel like it owed me courage. No one knew I was here. I stepped out into the cold, breath fogging. My feet crunched against the gravel. Every step toward that garage felt heavier than it should, not because I was scared, though part of me was, but because this place still held pieces of me. Blood, memory, silence. I stood just inside the threshold, letting the cold sink into my sleeves. It was exactly as I remembered. The bat lay on the far shelf, carelessly shoved behind an oil can. A scuff mark where I'd fallen still stained the concrete. I didn't stare at it long. Instead, I looked up, and there it was, tucked into the top corner, half hidden behind a wooden beam, a small black dome no one in this house had remembered to erase. The camera. They'd rewritten the story, erased me with words. But they'd missed the one thing they couldn't sweet-talk or bribe or rehearse away. I grabbed the stepladder from the back wall and climbed slowly, 1 foot at a time, ribs still sore. The camera was connected to a small DVR unit in the cabinet below. I pried it open. Dusty, but the power light blinked. I pulled the drive free and slipped it into my backpack like it was a loaded gun. Back in my car, I opened my laptop on the passenger seat, plugged the drive in. My hands shook harder now, breath catching. The footage started. Grainy, time-stamped, silent. I watched myself walk in, nervous, arms crossed. Derek pacing like a caged animal. Marla leaning against the doorframe, already filming. Raymond in the shadows, face expressionless. Then the bat. The blow. My body hitting the floor. The blood. I didn't blink for 2 whole minutes. Just stared. Watched myself get erased and recorded in the same breath. Watched them laugh. Saw Marla pocket her phone. Saw Raymond say something I couldn't hear. But I remembered the words like scars. Maybe now you'll learn to share. I sat there frozen, eyes wide, throat raw, until the tears came, not from grief, from relief. It was all there, every lie, every second. They couldn't gaslight a camera. The moment hung heavy, like the dawn itself had paused, waiting to see what I'd do next. Then, "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Knox." The voice cut through the stillness. I turned fast, nearly knocking my laptop off. The seat. Officer Patel stood just outside the garage, coat collar pulled up against the wind. My first thought, was panic. He was going to shut this down. Tell me I was trespassing, maybe even arrest me, but he didn't move. He looked down at the laptop screen, at the paused image of Derek mid-swing. You found it, he said. Good. They called to have it deleted 2 nights ago. I delayed the request. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. He stepped closer. Look, I'm not your lawyer. I'm not here to take sides, but I've seen men like your father. Money doesn't buy silence, it rents it. And it always runs out. Why help me? I finally asked. His voice softened. Because truth doesn't shout, Mr. Knox. It whispers. And if you don't hold on to it, someone else will rewrite it louder. He pulled a business card from his coat pocket, slid it onto my windshield. If you're filing anything, don't tip your hand. Not yet. Not until it's solid. Then he walked away. No threats, no questions, just gone. I sat there for another long minute, clutching that drive like it was oxygen. This wasn't revenge, not yet. But it was something better. Reality reclaimed. I stepped out of the garage as the sun finally climbed over the rooftops, casting long shadows over the cracked driveway. I looked down at the place where my blood had soaked into the ground. It looked different now, washed clean, almost. You taught me to be silent, I whispered. Now you'll see what silence can build. As I drove away, the garage faded in my rearview mirror, but my thoughts didn't. I thought of Mrs. Cooper and her tired but kind eyes. If you want justice, you'll need proof before you speak. Now I had proof, but deep down, something else twisted in my chest. I still wanted my father to care. That, more than the bruises, more than the betrayal, was the wound that wouldn't close. Even now, even after all this, I wanted him to see me, to believe me, to protect me. He never had, and maybe he never would. The garage light flickered once more as I turned the corner like a heartbeat in the dark. A signal, not just trauma anymore, not just fear. Proof. By mid-morning, I parked near the old courthouse. No crowds yet, just pigeons and early joggers. I pulled out the drive again, plugged it into the laptop one last time, one last check before submitting. The footage played again. I fast-forwarded, then it stuttered, jumped, a full 10 seconds missing. Gone. Someone had accessed the footage before me. They weren't done. They were already rewriting it again. That thought stayed with me as I drove back to Arlington, windshield streaked with freezing rain, wipers doing more smearing than clearing. I didn't bother with music, just the engine, the tapping on the roof, and the weight in my chest growing by the mile. By the time I stepped into my apartment, soaked to the socks, it was 11:22 p.m. One lamp lit the room, the desk one near the window. Everything else stayed in shadow. I kicked off my shoes, peeled off the wet jacket, and sat down at my desk. The DVR drive still plugged into my laptop, screen asleep, but humming like it hadn't blinked since I left the courthouse. My eyes drifted to the corner of the screen, still missing 10 seconds. I ran the footage again anyway, over and over. The third swing, cut, jump forward, my body already on the ground. Marla's phone pointed at me like a hunter's scope. Frame after frame, silent and damning. Something in me refused to believe it was a glitch. Someone had gone in. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Then I noticed it. The red blinking light on my landline. It hadn't blinked when I left. I hit play. Raymond's voice filled the room, measured, warm. The kind of voice he used when he wanted to sound like a father instead of a chess player. Avery, son, I think we've all said things we regret. Let's not ruin this family over one misunderstanding. You'll come home tomorrow. We'll talk. Pause. I've spoken to Officer Patel. He agrees it's best to handle this privately. My stomach dropped. Patel? He said he was helping me. Then Marla's voice, smooth like a lie, dressed in Sunday clothes. We love you, Avery. But if you keep pushing this, well, things might come out that you wouldn't want the world to hear. Click. Message over. I didn't move, not for a full minute. I just sat there and listened to the rain and the radiator ticking behind me. The apartment felt smaller somehow, like the walls had leaned in while I was gone. Things, I replayed it. Heard her say it again. What things? I clicked through my old email folders, half on instinct. It was buried deep, 5 years back. One of Derek's drunken tantrums I hadn't bothered to delete. Subject line, you owe me one attachment. I opened it. There it was, a photo from years ago. Me, drunk at a company party, slouched on a couch, head tilted onto a coworker's lap. Her name was Caroline, married now. Back then, it was nothing but office gossip. Nothing illegal, nothing I'd ever hide, but if framed the right way, twisted, it could burn me. Suddenly, I was 17 again, standing in Raymond's study, being told that dignity was a family's currency, and mine had always been counterfeit. The phone rang again. I stared at it, thought about letting it ring out, but I picked up. Avery, Marla cooed. Thank God. I was starting to worry. I know this has all been hard, but you're making it harder than it needs to be. I said nothing. She went on. Your father's under so much stress. Derek's having nightmares since the accident. He doesn't eat. He barely sleeps. I know you think you were hurt, and maybe you were, but your memory's always been dramatic. There it was. Dramatic. The family code word for, we don't believe you. She softened her voice. Come home. We'll fix this. I'll even make your favorite. That lemon pie you used to beg for. I actually laughed. Just once. Dry, short, bitter. Don't bother, I said. You'll never see me eat at that table again. I hung up. The room felt colder, but also clearer. I looked at the DVR again. Still blinking. Still real. They'd rewritten the narrative my whole life. Bent it. Framed it. Smoothed out the ugly parts and pinned it all to me. But they didn't know I'd started telling my own story. I backed up the footage twice. One copy to an external drive I kept in a fireproof box under the bed. Another to a secure cloud account I opened under an alias, John M. Hale, a name I hadn't spoken since college. My mother's maiden name, reversed. Then I typed a short email to Officer Patel. Subject, we need to talk. Now. I hit send, and only then did the calm crack. My hands trembled, my chest tightened. The weight I'd been carrying since that night in the garage finally made itself known. I looked at the window, not through it, at my reflection, bruises fading, but the eyes, still empty, still waiting for someone to tell me I mattered. I whispered, You were right, Mom. Silence can kill, but it can also bury the wrong people. Her name hadn't left my lips in years. She died when I was 12. Stroke, quick and cruel. The last person who stood between me and them. Thunder rolled overhead. Another voicemail. Blocked number. I hesitated, then played it. Derek's voice, low, mocking. You think you're clever. You're not. You're just next. Click. I stared at the phone. The desk lamp flickered. Then the laptop screen flashed once, twice, then black. The DVR light blinked twice, then died. My cloud access logged out by itself. They were inside. Inside everything. That thought kept rolling in my head as sleep thinned into a jagged edge and then vanished altogether. By dawn, the sky was a pale bruise, and the building hummed with the kind of quiet that precedes a siren. I was back at the apartment for only a handful of hours when pounding came at my door. "Mr. Knox, Arlington PD." My heart jumped so hard it hurt. I shoved the blanket off, feet finding slippers, and opened the door to 2 uniforms and a third man in plain clothes, a lean, sharp-faced detective I'd seen once before on the news, Halverson. He had a file under his arm and a look like he'd been given instructions he intended to follow without argument. "Avery Knox?" he asked. "Yes." My voice sounded small in the hallway. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. The words felt like a physical blow. "For fraud, digital tampering, and extortion attempts against your family." I laughed, one of those hollow things that isn't a laugh at all. "You've got the wrong guy." Halverson didn't look moved. He produced a printout and slid it across to me before I could speak. It was my email, time-stamped the night before. "I'll ruin you unless you pay me what I deserve." My jaw went dry. I hadn't written that. I'd been typing Officer Patel, for God's sake. I'd been careful. I thought I was careful. They put the cuffs on without flair, a mechanical choreography, click, fold, press. Neighbors peered from behind curtains, the only audience to the spectacle. As they led me out, Halverson said, conversational, almost kind, "Your father's already made a statement. He says you've been unstable since your mother's death." The mention of Mom felt like a low blow. They'd dug through everything. They'd found the oldest wound and used it as leverage. In the squad car, the world felt claustrophobic. Vinyl seats, the smell of the station, that metallic echo of command. Officer Patel was there when they processed me, leaning against a far wall like he'd been waiting. He didn't meet my eyes right away. Later, when they took me into an interrogation room, Halverson closed the door and slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, frames from the DVR. One showed me with the bat. The angle was cropped and timed to make it look like I'd swung. The missing 10 seconds had been repurposed. They'd stitched a story that placed me as the aggressor. I stared until the paper blurred. "They stole it," I said into the room's stale air. "They took the footage and made me look like the bad guy." Halverson rested his hands on the table. "We work with the evidence we're given. If it shows you acting violently, that's what we record." "You're not recording the truth," I said. "You're recording what they fed you." He tilted his head, a faint smile of someone who already knew the answer. "Families protect themselves. Sometimes that means making a narrative tight enough for the rest of the world to accept." The room held its breath. The fluorescent light hummed in time with my pulse. Same color, same flicker from that garage bulb. Only this time, the light felt less like a threat and more like a metronome. Each flicker measured the seconds I had to plan. Hours blurred. I don't remember when they took my fingerprints or when someone read my rights. What I remember is the cell. A narrow cot, a metal sink, and the way the cold made every thought sharp. I sat against the wall and thought about motions and steps and consequences like a man going over a map in his head. When Patel came in, not in uniform but wearing a plain jacket, I braced for betrayal. Instead, he looked tired, older than the last time, and closer to something like regret. "I tried," he said before I could speak. "They're bigger than they look." "Why are you here then?" I asked. "To tell you this, stay quiet for 72 hours. He lowered his voice. Let them believe the story for a little while. I can buy you time, maybe enough to flip this on them. But you can't talk yet. If you do, they'll bury everything and no one will hear you. My mind scrolled through every option and came back to the same cold place, silence as strategy. It felt wrong to be told to shut up when all I wanted to do was scream the truth until someone listened. But Patel's face had the kind of worn honesty you only see in people who've been around long enough to see systems protect themselves. "You're not the first they've done this to," he added quietly, "but you could be the last." Before I could ask how, he pressed a small card into my hand and left. The note was simple, professional, contact info for a public defender and a name he suggested I trust. I laid back on the wire mattress and thought of the DVR. I'd mailed the original drive to someone I trusted, Sarah Holt, a journalist in the city who'd once interviewed me for a piece on workplace ethics. She cared about stories where power hurt people. I knew she'd keep it somewhere safe, at least for now. It had felt like a reckless thing to do, but I couldn't take the risk of having the device on me when they came looking. Time operates differently in a holding cell. Minutes stretch into long strands. At some point, a guard slid a small square of paper under the door. I unfolded it with fingers that didn't steady. "They know about Sarah," it read. My stomach dropped. My hands clenched. The idea that they had already reached into the places I trusted, into a safe I thought was secure, made the world tilt. That night, under that lazy humming light, I stopped pretending the system would save me. The notion of justice as a patient beast was gone. In its place rose something colder but clearer. Plans, alliances, the slow arithmetic of exposing those who'd used love like a weapon. I pressed my forehead to the wall and muttered the same line I'd said in hospital, only this time it sounded less like a hope and more like an oath. "You can't rewrite what's already recorded." That line echoed through the still air of the motel room like a bell rung too late. I sat at the edge of the stiff mattress, bare feet on carpet that felt more like sandpaper. The curtains were drawn tight. The hum of an old refrigerator in the corner barely covered the sound of trucks rumbling past on the highway. The laptop screen cast a pale glow across my face, showing more exhaustion than I wanted to admit. I'd barely slept since they let me out on bail 2 days ago. Not out of relief. I hadn't felt safe since I walked free. I knew bail wasn't freedom. It was bait. I stared at the encrypted chat box blinking on the screen. The name, Sarah Holt. Status, offline. My fingers hovered. I typed, "You there?" I waited. Rain tapped faintly against the window. Then the cursor jumped. "Sarah, you're out." Me, "Barely. They're moving faster than I thought." Sarah, "You weren't wrong." I dug into the county records. "Your father's company donated to Halverson's campaign last year. Max limit." My chest tightened. It wasn't surprising, but seeing it typed out like that, it made everything concrete. They weren't just twisting family drama. They had money, reach, access. This was beyond a bruised face in a garage. Me, "So Halverson's not the problem. He's the protection." Sarah, "Exactly. And it gets worse. The copy of the DVR footage you mailed me? Someone tried accessing it through a DOJ secured server yesterday. Not local law enforcement. Federal." I stopped breathing for a beat. The air in the room suddenly felt thinner. Me, "Who?" Her reply didn't come right away. When it did, it felt like a slow blade sliding between the ribs. Sarah, "Patel's name is on the log." I stared at the screen, not seeing the words, just the shape of betrayal. Patel, the one who warned me, who played the voice of reason in the storm. All that quiet concern. It wasn't a lifeline. It was a leash, The 72-hour advice? It hadn't been for my protection. It was for theirs. I whispered into the room. They used me to buy time. And I gave it to them. Sarah messaged again. Sarah, I'm sorry. I wanted to believe him too. My jaw tightened. The guilt wasn't hers. It was mine. I'd trusted a system that smiled while it sharpened the knife behind its back. I leaned forward, fingers flying across the keyboard. Me. Then we don't wait. We go now. Public. She hesitated. Sarah, you mean leak it? Me. Not leak. Expose. All of it. Footage, names, timelines, everything. If we're going down, let's drag the truth out with us. Sarah, you've got until midnight. That's all I can give you before it's out of my hands. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Midnight. That word again. Seems like every storm in my life came at midnight. I began assembling everything. The original footage, my hospital records, voicemail files, the email they fabricated, even that photo Derek had kept stashed. A way to blackmail me. Every ugly, twisted thread, I stacked it all in a folder named Inheritance. Then, for good measure, I made a copy and backed it up to a flash drive hidden in the vent above the motel's bathroom mirror. At some point, I stopped and looked around. The motel room hadn't changed. Mustard curtains, chipped paint, the faint smell of bleach covering something older. But everything inside me had. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore. I was trying to end it. Then came doubt. What if they're watching now? What if they've already followed Sarah? What if this ends with both of us missing and no one asking questions? I reached for my phone, opened the recorder, and hit record. If I disappear, I said slowly, voice steady, don't look for me. Just release the folder. All of it. Let the footage speak. My thumb hovered, then saved the file under my mother's name. Carol MP3. She always said my silence would protect me, but maybe she was wrong, or maybe she didn't live long enough to see the kind of silence these people deal in. The motel lamp flickered again, same rhythm as the one in the garage, same color, same hum. Only now it didn't paralyze me, it kept time. A countdown, not to destruction, but to revelation. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over ignore, but instinct won. I picked up. Nothing. Then a message buzzed through. You shouldn't have involved her. A second buzz, photo attachment. Sarah's car, parked outside her apartment. Engine running. Headlights on. But no driver in sight. My breath caught in my throat. She never left her engine running. Not at night. Not alone. I whispered, "Oh God." They got to her first. And for the first time in this entire mess, I didn't feel fear. I felt fury. The motel door slammed behind me hard enough to rattle the glass. I didn't care. I was already in the car, ignition roaring to life, the rain hitting the windshield like it had something personal to say. The drive to Sarah's building blurred past in streaks of red and gray. My hands clenched the wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. Her photo burned in my mind. Headlights on, engine running, no driver in sight. By the time I reached her block, the sky was splitting open with sirens. It was 2:37 a.m. The street was a storm of chaos. Fire trucks, flashing lights, drenched police officers shouting into radios. The smell of gasoline and smoke was thick, sour in my mouth. And there it was, apartment 4B, or what was left of it. Blackened windows, orange flickers still licking inside. I ran straight toward the tape. "Sarah!" My voice cracked through the rain. One of the firefighters grabbed my chest and pushed me back. "You can't be here, sir." "She lives there," I choked. "She was in there." Sir, we don't have confirmation yet. Step back. But my eyes had already found it. Her car. Still idling, wipers sliding back and forth like clockwork. The driver's door wide open. And on the passenger seat, half soaked from the rain creeping in through the open window, a scorched manila envelope. I broke past the line, sprinted to it. The envelope was hot, edges singed. Inside, a USB drive, melted at the corners, black marker smeared across the label, copy to AK. I dropped to my knees in the wet street, the fire's reflection dancing in the puddles beneath me. That wasn't an accident. It was a warning, or worse, a verdict. Behind me, the building groaned, one final wall folding in on itself like paper. Steam hissed, windows shattered. My ears rang with more than just sirens. A cop yelled something. I didn't turn around. "You think this is just a fire?" I muttered, not even to him. "You think this just happened?" No answer. Just more lights, more noise, more silence from the people who knew. Back at the motel an hour later, I sat on the floor with a laptop, soaked, freezing. My fingers shook, but I plugged in the half-melted drive. It clicked. Word. A pause. Then, a single file loaded. Audio. I hit play. Sarah's voice crackled to life through static. "If you're hearing this, it means they found me first, but I made 3 copies. The truth doesn't burn that easily." I exhaled. A shallow breath. Maybe my first real one all night. You brilliant, stubborn woman. The next moments passed like instinct. At 5:02 a.m., I opened her platform, Truthline, the secure public dump she once told me about in passing during an old ethics panel. A place for whistleblowers. No filters, no spin, just truth. I uploaded everything. Footage, hospital records, altered emails, the doctored garage screenshot, even Derek's voice message from months ago. You think you're better than us? Maybe it's time everyone sees what you really are. The progress bar ticked forward, 20%, 43%, 76%. As it reached 100%, a message blinked, "File received, public release in 60 seconds." I stared at the screen. My reflection looked back, beaten, exhausted, unrecognizable, but alive. "Let them see. Let everyone see." I whispered, "Let them watch." The clock hit 0. By sunrise, the world had changed. 6 a.m., every screen, every feed, from news tickers to social media, echoed the same thing. Knox case. The garage footage looped on repeat. The audio of Raymond's backroom deal with Halverson. Marla's voice, caught offhand on voicemail. "He's always been dramatic. Maybe this time we can finally shut him up." Every mask burned away. I sat in that cheap chair, in that cheap room, and listened as the Attorney General's office launched a formal investigation. Halverson was suspended, Patel placed under review. Derek, Raymond, Marla, their silence became the loudest thing of all. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I breathed. For the first time in years, I filled my lungs without waiting for someone to take the air away. 3 weeks later, I stood inside a packed courtroom. I didn't wear a tie. I didn't dress to impress anyone. I wasn't there for mercy. The judge didn't drag it out. Given the overwhelming, verified evidence provided through federal review, this court finds the defendants guilty of aggravated assault, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. The gavel dropped like thunder. Raymond flinched. Derek stared at the floor like a little boy waiting for detention. Marla tried to blink away the disbelief. I didn't look at them, not even once. I just heard Sarah's voice, echoing like it had in that motel room. "The truth doesn't burn that easily." "No," I whispered. "It doesn't." Weeks passed. One evening, I found myself walking along the Potomac just after sunset. The water was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything from you. In my jacket pocket, the melted USB, burned, bent, but still whole. I let it slip from my hand into the river and watched the ripples carry it away. Not everything needed to be kept. Some things needed to be buried, not in silence, but in peace. And just as the last ripple faded, my phone buzzed. One notification, unknown sender. You exposed the family, but not everyone who paid them. I stared at the screen, and then up at the sky. Heavy, gray, endless. So that's how it was going to be. I nodded to myself. Then I guess I'm not done yet. That sentence stuck with me longer than I expected. It rode beside me on the bus rides downtown, echoed in the steam curling off my morning coffee, slipped between the cracks of sleep on quieter nights. 3 months had passed since the verdict. Autumn had taken hold of the city, painting the sidewalks in copper and gold. From my new apartment overlooking the Potomac, I could hear the life of DC returning. Sirens in the distance, laughter under umbrellas, the soft shuffle of early commuters down wet pavement. It was normal, or close enough to trick me some mornings. The apartment was smaller than the one I grew up in, but that was the point. No shadows in the corners, no ghosts waiting behind the door, just blank walls and morning light filtering through blinds half open. On my desk sat a single-framed headline from a now-defunct local paper, "The Knox Case. Truth Doesn't Burn." Sarah's words. I was working with a non-profit now, reviewing whistleblower cases, consulting on ethics protocols, even giving the occasional guest lecture. Funny, right? From suspect to speaker. From the one accused of tampering to the one helping others untangle their own messes. But even with the title and the quiet routine, there was a weight that didn't lift. Not fully. I was halfway through reviewing a testimony draft when the email notification chimed. Subject, round 2. No sender. My stomach turned. That was the same phrase from the anonymous text the day of the verdict. The one that warned, you expose the family, but not everyone who paid them. I clicked. The email opened into a single embedded video. No explanation, just footage. Grainy, low resolution. Probably from a parking garage camera. Raymond stood in the corner of the frame, partially shadowed by a concrete pillar. Across from him was a tall man in a charcoal suit, his back to the lens. The timestamp put it 2 months before the trial, just days before Sarah's apartment burned. They shook hands, and the suited man spoke. As long as the file disappears, the donations keep flowing. The man's face never turned, but the voice, unmistakable. I paused the clip, ran it back again. On the 4th replay, I caught it, a reflection in a nearby car window. Just a flash, but it was enough. Detective Halverson. Alive. So he hadn't vanished. He hadn't burned with the evidence or buried his guilt. He was still moving in the dark, just far enough outside the spotlight to keep himself untouched. You survived the fire, didn't you? I whispered, eyes locked on that blurred silhouette. I opened the drawer in my desk and pulled out a thin silver packet. Inside was the 3rd USB, the one Sarah hinted at in her final message. A backup even she hadn't told me the location of until that last voicemail surfaced. Still sealed, still intact. It smelled faintly like smoke, like damp paper and melted rubber. I rubbed my thumb across the charred edge. The same absent motion I'd made before dropping the first one into the river, but this time it wasn't grief I felt. It was clarity. I stepped outside, slipping the USB into my coat pocket. The wind had bite now, the kind of cold that chased you down alleys and into stairwells. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk like whispers that couldn't decide whether to stay or flee. Down by the riverbank, I paused. The water moved slow and wide beneath a sky choked with clouds. I thought about what this drive represented. I could hand it to the FBI. I could go to the press, or I could launch it through a new channel, one built outside the reach of corrupted hands. I reached into my pocket and felt the drive press against my palm. Sarah's voice returned, low and steady. Truth isn't a weapon, Avery. It's a mirror. Hold it steady, no matter what looks back. I crouched beside the water, staring at the surface. My reflection wavered, older somehow, not just in the face, but in the way it held itself. Then let's see what's left to face. Back inside, I opened a new upload window, EchoNet, a secure server built by Sarah's old team, funded by anonymous donors who, like her, hated unfinished stories. The interface was simple, one window, one button. As the upload began, I sat quietly, letting the room breathe around me. They called me dramatic, I murmured mostly to myself. They called me broken. Outside, the street lamp buzzed, not flickering this time, just glowing, strong and uninterrupted. But you can't break what's already been reforged. The progress bar inched upward, 47%, 61%, 82%. I didn't rush it. I just watched, one breath at a time. My chest didn't tighten, my palms didn't sweat. By the time it hit 100%, I felt like something inside me had settled, not ended, just grounded. That night, I walked past the courthouse. It was quiet. The steps shimmered under a thin layer of rain. No cameras, no picket signs, just stone and memory. I placed a single white lily on the ledge near the main entrance. For Sarah, for the truth, for everything they couldn't kill. I turned to leave. As I crossed the street, headlights washed over me, not harsh, but slow. A black sedan passed by, windows tinted. Just as it slipped beside me, the passenger side revealed a face in profile. Gray suit. Halverson. Our eyes locked for a breath. Not long, but long enough. He didn't slow down. I didn't stop walking. Let him know I saw him. Let him know I wasn't hiding. Back home, I took off my coat, sat at the window with a cup of coffee gone cold, and waited for sleep to find me. My phone buzzed once, a notification, one line. Some battles end in court. Others wait in the shadows. I stared at it. My reflection stared back through the dark screen. Either way, I said aloud, setting the phone down on the windowsill. I'm ready.